March the 14th, 2026. Guys, beautiful sunny Saturday morning here in central Mississippi, 55 degrees, not a cloud in the sky. It is wonderful weather. I hope you guys are enjoying this weekend wherever you are at. Now, the video I did last night, guys, was talking about the strikes on Kharg Island. And that's the #1 oil exporting facility for Iran, which puts it in the top on the planet. Now, the reports are, and I did see some CENTCOM images that they released and declassified of the strikes themselves. They hit the airport runways and they took out the missile defense systems, radars, things like that. Anything that would prevent anyone from coming to the island. And that was kind of the headlines of the report last night. But you remember they said it was the most intense and the most powerful bombing campaign in the history of the Middle East. Now, they may have to ask the ancient Sumerians about what happened there, but anyway. So it had to be, if it was that intense, guys, it had to be way more than just Kharg Island, right? Because you look at the initial bombing campaign down the highways through Iraq. Remember that? Anyway, so the reports now are coming in. I'd like to share those with you about what was hit and a couple of other things that I think are important in the situation that we are in now. But it says, although Kharg Island was the focal point of Friday night's precision raids, it was part of a much larger nationwide campaign. U.S. and Israeli forces targeted military, internal security, and industrial infrastructure across 26 of Iran's 31 provinces to degrade the regime's retaliatory capabilities. And that was a good move because, as we said over a week ago, that any move from either side on the Kharg Island was definitely going to create a conflict. So I don't know if they hit Kharg Island first or they went through these 26 or 25 other provinces and took out the defenses first and then hit Kharg Island. We'll never know that. It's not that important, but it would signal that the U.S. was aware that once we hit Kharg, that all hell was going to break loose, and it did anyway. And what has happened this morning, our U.S. Embassy in Iraq, in the green zone, you remember that? It was hit. And what happened was I think they took out a heliopad that was real close to what they were aiming at, but they got what they were aiming at. And it wasn't just a haphazard lob a missile over into Iraq. What they took out inside the U.S. Embassy was the missile defense systems and the radar information, satellite information, the ability to communicate there. In other words, both sides are thinking the same thing. And again, I'm not pro-Iranian in any way when I say that the fact that they've got some pretty good tacticians on both sides of this war. And to say they don't is actually walking into a trap. And so this morning, and there's images, daylight images of smoke rising over the wall inside the Baghdad embassy, the U.S. embassy there. And the reports are, again, they hit critical infrastructure for that area. They blinded the U.S. and as far as the U.S. embassy, but how much coverage did that satellite and missile defense system cover? Probably a wide area up into the borders of Iran itself. You know, they're side by side. So they took that out. Now, one of the main things that I think they were taking out, and we're about to get into the other places they hit, was a very large, powerful missile that can go about 1,200 miles. Remember, we saw a strike at 700 miles over into Raskut, the petroleum exporting area that's in Oman, that was outside of was supposed to be outside of the danger zone in that 700 miles, but it was hit, and it was hit hard. But they've got another missile that can go 1,200 miles, and it's very powerful. Plus, they have another missile that is very powerful, but it's designed to be, it was initially designed to be used in helicopters or on marine fast boats, things like that, but it carries a very powerful warhead. And those can be launched from a truck or, ground-based installation, anything. Now, they're not super far range, but they're very fast and they're very powerful. They're hard to take down. And I think they've been holding back on it, at least this big one. And so we're going to look at that. But let's look at what else was hit last night. Now, in the government, they're saying high security compounds, including the presidential office and the Ministry of Intelligence in Iran, were hit. Law Enforcement Command, LEC sites in Garchak and Basid checkpoints throughout the province were targeted to disrupt domestic control. And there was a couple of videos 2 days ago, guys, that showed you just have these, they would shut down the roads. You couldn't tell if it was just IRC, GC guards or agents of them, just shut down, harass people in their cars, and probably worse than that. And what was happening was there was U.S. drones, and you could see 3 in the air over one checkpoint. That was, as soon as they set up the checkpoints, the drones took them out. They took out the people at the checkpoints. Precision, I don't know what they were using, but it was like, bam, dust. And they were no longer checkpointing anything but checking out. Anyway, they got, again, Garchak, the checkpoints throughout the province, also military infrastructure at the Mehrabad Airport and the Parchin military complex, specifically the Telegon 2 site. They sustained damage last night. The Shah Ray Oil Refinery, which is south of Tehran, and the Shiran Oil Depot north of Tehran were struck, resulting in large fires. Again, they did not touch Kark's oil. And really, I don't think they drill much oil there. It's just their main refinery and shipping. In central and western Iran, south of Tehran, guys, it says Isfahan strikes targeted the city's extensive ballistic missile research and production facilities. And Pete Hegseth has been talking about that. They've got to take out their ability to reproduce the missiles. We got to let them, I guess, use up their inventory but make sure they can't rebuild them. In Tabriz and Zanjan, military installations in these northwestern hubs were hit to neutralize regional command centers. They're getting ready for something big, and Karg Island, again, is going to be one of the focal points. And the reason I say that is we have 2,500 Marines on the way to Iran. Now, they haven't said that they were going to Karg Island. The information I can find is basically to help ensure the passage of ships through the Straits of Hormuz. Now, that is south, probably over 100 miles south of Karg Island. Down in the southern parts of the Persian Gulf is where the straits are. You've seen the maps. So that's boots on the ground, regardless of what's said. And if you think about it, with Karg Island, for example, they didn't want to hit the oil, but you're going to have boots on the ground there to control it, right? So now we are going to have boots on the ground. What is the significance of having military or Marines on Karg Island? They're open targets. They're open targets. And you don't have deep caves there. It's a coral structure island there. There's underground facilities, but it's not like in the mountains. So it's open target. So what they're thinking, in my opinion, which is limited, 2,500 Marines on the way. You've got the U.S. Air Force taking out anything that could hit Karg Island, and possibly areas or ships coming or exiting or entering the Straits of Hormuz. So Karg Island, again, focal point. I don't know how many of the 2,500 Marines will be there, but I bet you there'll be quite a few if we're going to control it. The U.S. is going to handle that. Then they're doing everything they can to take out any kind of missile situation or missile facilities or launch facilities or command control facilities that could attack Karg Island with our Marines on it. Or if we had some station on the, would be the west side of the Straits of Hormuz, the friendly side, then you may have some there too, just to, keep an eye on things. They also hit what's called Kermanshah and Ilam. Facilities near the Iraqi border were targeted to disrupt supply lines and missile launch sites. So if you think about the chessboard, including Karg Island there, you would push back from the island, which is 15 miles offshore, inland into Iran, and push as much defense, especially missile attack sites, back away from that northern section of the Persian Gulf completely. And that may be what we're seeing here. And KON, K-O-N, military sites in the Holy City were reportedly among the targets. Now, on the southern coast and naval hubs, they were hit. Bandar Abbas, the Shahid Raji port, and nearby naval aviation base were hit to degrade Iran's naval dominance in the Gulf. Remember, this other missile we're going to talk about can be launched from small, fast boats. And then in Bushehr, in addition to Karg Island, the Bushehr Air Base and the Farid Jam gas refinery sustained damage. In Shiraz, the 7th Tactical Air Base was struck to prevent the launch of retaliatory air sorties. Now, again, this is not looking like Iran is being degraded 80 or 90%. But it's the fog of war, and a lot of BS is getting pushed by both sides. Now, it looks like this is what they were after in the largest bombing ever in the history of the Middle East, is what's called the Khorramshahr 4, also known as the Kibar, has been a centerpiece of the current escalation, both as a weapon used by Iran and as a primary target for U.S. and Israeli airstrikes. They knew this was the bad boy. It wasn't one of the 700 miles, 1,200-mile range, and it can be extended to 2,000 miles if they lighten the payload on the front, and they said if they took out some of the guidance maneuverability of it, because if it sees something, it's going to maneuver way away from it using a lot of fuel. So they can dismantle or turn off the guidance system where it's not using fuel, waving back and forth, and lighten the payload to get it to 2,000 miles. But 1,200 is going to hit. Again, we saw the 700-mile strike, but 1,200 will reach many nations. Production facilities are functionally defeated. This is coming from Pete Hegseth. He stated yesterday that the U.S.-Israeli air campaign has functionally defeated Iran's ballistic missile production capacity by destroying the defense companies and lines that manufacture these components. Now, I don't know if you guys saw it or not, but there's a video going around. It doesn't look like AI. Maybe, but it doesn't have any of the characteristics of it, really. Is a tour through one of the Iranian military tunnels deep inside of some mountain. And there's rows of these Shahid drones and rows and rows. I'm talking about you can't even see around the corner. And it's like a big web of tunnels that are all interconnected. And one is just these fast speedboats that they're saying they're taking out. They look like maybe 30 or 40 foot cruise yachts with high performance engines on them. But they have missile launchers, front anti-aircraft guns on them, all kind of stuff. But all of this is lined up according to the film. They have all of this in store. So you still got drones, you still got the smaller Navy. Of course, it'd be hard to hide your big ships, but no larger than the Gulf of Persia is, or the Persian Gulf, that's all it needs, especially around the opening of the Hormuz Straits. And this is why there's a scramble to take out those missile sites, is because of the Kibar. And they're saying Iran has already been using it, and that's why the U.S. and Israel wants that thing gone. It says Iran has heavily deployed the Kibar in its recent retaliatory waves, part of Operation True Promise 4 is what they're calling it. Attacks on U.S. bases. Iran claims the Kibar missile struck the Al Dhafra air base in the UAE, causing a massive crater and destroying half of the U.S. officers' barracks. They also reported strikes on U.S. assets in Bahrain, Qatar, and Kuwait. Now, I saw one image this morning of a huge crater. It may have been in Tel Aviv. I'm going to double check, and it'll be in the afternoon update. But this thing, it looked like it hit in a heavily populated, not industrial, but public area with high-rise apartments, and maybe a building's gone and a maybe 20-foot crater, very wide. And I think what scares both Israel and the U.S. about the Kibar missile, guys, is if you remember a video at least a week ago, we were showing incoming over Israel, possibly Tel Aviv, I think. And it was the big rockets coming in at night, and then all of these, the cluster of warheads left that big rocket and scattered out in many directions, making it impossible. Well, what they've done again is that's the Kibar, and they can be run with a straight warhead, or it can be changed into the cluster version. That's what they're calling it. And it will disperse up to 80 submunitions to saturate air defenses. That's what scares them. That's what they're after. You can't blame them. Now, let's look a little deeper into this missile. It's Iran's most advanced liquid fuel ballistic missile. It has a range of 200 kilometers, 1,240 miles. Warhead carries a massive 1,500 kilogram to 2,000 kilogram payload, one of the heaviest in their inventory. And that 500 kilogram difference may be if it's a single warhead or the 80 multiple warheads there. It's one of the heaviest in the inventory. It is reported to reach Mach 16 outside the atmosphere and Mach 8 during its terminal phase. Now, that terminal phase is when it's kind of shutting itself down. It's over the target, and it's dropping like a rock, like a huge dart. Now, it got there at Mach 16, and then with gravity, it can reach up to Mach 8, even with the engines off, and that way it can't be traced with a heat signature. You understand what I'm saying? As it's getting there, but this terminal phase, it's over the target, and that's what happened when we saw Raceput get hit 700 miles away from Iran. Got way really high. You saw those missiles drop straight through the smoke. Nothing could stop them, and they finished the infrastructure. It's going to be a while before they reopen that section. Anyway, that's very fast, guys. Now, this part of the information, it's not dated, but it could have happened during the strikes last night. But the Kibar missile hit Ben Gurion Airport and U.S. assets like the Dafra Air Base. That's the only one it lists, but it says assets. And it can carry up to the cluster munitions for up to 80 targets. That's something, isn't it? Now, the other one that they're after is called the Hadar missile. It's not as long range, 12 to 30 kilometers, but it's perfect for inside the close proximity of the Persian Gulf and Iran there. But the Hadar missile is considered a precise air-to-ground missile design made by the Ministry of Defense and the Armed Forces Logistics of Iran. Now, they're saying air-to-ground, but also in other reports, they can, I mentioned, mount them on boats, mount them on trucks. And of course, they could be ground launched, but they were designed for precision air-to-ground missile because the tracking is so sophisticated, guys, that it can hit almost anything. So unlike the giant Kibars that could take out a ship instantly, these would be easier to hide, easier to manufacture, cheaper, and very deadly. So they're after the Kibars and the Hadars. That's the two they're concerned about. We've heard about Iran having some type of super weapon that they're keeping secret. Don't know if that's facts or fiction, but it makes me wonder about that Kibar, the large one. Is that what they're talking about, or do they have nukes? Now, the very latest coming in this morning is Trump is calling on other nations to send warships to Iran to try to ensure the Strait of Hormuz was open for oil tankers to pass through. Now, a week ago, he was saying we had it done. He told Starmer, we don't need another aircraft carrier group there, anything else. We've already got it done. We don't want you to come in after the battle's over, which was the perfect thing he should have told that fool. But anyway, it changes. Trump first indicated ships from other countries had already agreed to send the ships, but then he said he hoped they would be on their way. Hopefully China, France, Japan, South Korea, and the UK, and others that are affected by this artificial constraint will send ships to the area so that the Hormuz Straits will no longer be a threat by a nation that has been totally decapitated. Big words. I'm just saying that they're not totally decapitated when they're hitting our air bases. And they hit one of the big airports in the UAE that was used by some of our air tankers. And by the way, guys, they took out 5 more of our air tankers. We had lost one that caused the lives of 6 of our soldiers. Another one had gotten taken out, maybe, I'm not sure how it was, there were 2. And then now suddenly they're reporting 5 more have been bombed while parked. Now, I'm not sure if this was at the UAE air base that was bombed. There's images of that because you can't tell what they hit. It's someone's taking a cell phone video from inside the airport up behind the glass, I guess, where passengers are seeing or watching out through that area. It's daylight. You see a couple of big explosions. But then the UAE police at the airport ran and grabbed this dude who was from Britain and told him to delete it immediately. They didn't want anybody to see that. And now it's not mainstream at all that 5 of our air tankers got bombed sitting on the tarmac. Anyway, so he deleted it. Now they're threatening to persecute him and hold him for 2 years in jail because they know that more than likely it was released, even though he immediately deleted it when they said don't do it. What would anybody would have done? You were up in the airport, you're seeing, quarter mile out into the tarmac out there, a couple of bombs hit, you're going to flip. People nowadays are going to flip their cell phone up and film it. But that's telling you the desperation. The only reason I brought it up, the desperation of the different countries to keep critical information from the public. They're going to lock a guy up for 2 years because he filmed and then immediately deleted the bombing at that base. Anyway, with high gas prices hurting him politically, this is coming just a report, guys. Trump has said the U.S. might begin accompanying oil tankers through the strait even while war rages. And now, the way I would do it, if I were going to risk my soldiers in my Navy and put them in that situation, their minds would not be on guarding a big tanker full of oil. First, they would go through there in a very powerful force with nobody else, no civilians, no, as far as the oil companies or oil tankers or anything like that. Just go in there full barreled, all eyes on, and dare them to shoot you. Then when you get it cleared that way, then you're going to have ship traffic. Until then, you're going to have if you're saying we're trying to get people to escort them and we got to get it open and all that, unless the insurance companies agree with it, they're not going to do it. So again, you're going to have to go in there if you're going to open up the straits, or you're going to guard ships coming out of it, and you're going to have to do a little bit of damage first. But don't take the civilians in on the initial movement. Go in. They're going to light you up. You're going to see where they're launching from in that area, and you're not going to have to be worried about civilians on a boat behind you. You're in attack and defensive mode, moving quickly to an offensive mode, if that makes any sense. Just saying, that's how I would do it. If I'm going to put my Navy in there, I don't want them distracted by oil tankers blowing up and they're trying to pull people out of the water or whatever. If you're going to do it, put an empty oil tanker in there with remote control or something, just cruising in between the battleships. And that may pull them out, because that's what happens in this war, in these mountains. The only way they're finding them is when a satellite, lights up, a missile getting ready to launch or launching. And then they hit that area. Now, here's an update coming in, guys. It's saying that Iranian ballistic missiles have continued to set off air raid sirens across Israel today on Saturday. Most of them have been intercepted without casualties. But remember, I showed you, no, I didn't show you, I told you about an image. I may can find it before this video is over, that there's a huge crater there. And there's no way people in that area survived it, not in that immediate place. Anyway, it says most of them have intercepted without casualties, but the most recent attack injured 2 people, including a boy in moderate to serious condition, according to Israel's emergency service. If that's true, that area was evacuated beforehand. They're saying that Israeli airstrikes are expanding into areas where the Iranian-backed militia Hezbollah does not exercise control, hitting Beirut's largely Christian northern suburbs. Now, we're in the fog of war. And I think, just going to say this, I do think that Israel is taking advantage of Big Brother sitting there with a protective umbrella over them. They're reaching out to targets a little further, a little deeper than they normally would because of the U.S.'s presence. But in my mind, I trust nothing that Benjamin Netanyahu says or what he says his intentions are. Because I think he's like a Lindsey Graham of the Middle East, if you understand what I'm saying. Now, one video I do have here, guys, is of Kark Island. And the CENTCOM released it this morning at 6:15, I think it was. Notice it says unclassified up there before anybody freaks out. But let's play this again. Kark Island. These are supposedly military installations, and I don't see any oil installations in the nearby area, but you can see pretty solid impacts. These could be the trackers. These could be not deep underground. Here's a little better image. There's some buildings on the side of that airport. We looked at that airport on the Kark Island maps, remember? 2 there. It looks like they maybe hit something, but so far up. Oh, man, there's one of those darts we've been watching. Another one. Yeah, so it looks like they have dug in a little deeper than I thought in some of these areas. But these are taking them out. So you're taking out, bam, they're taking out this defense system, 2,500 Marines moving somewhere. There's another one. And while this is going on, Israel's getting hit. Now, CENTCOM has released another declassified video. They're not naming the air base, but this is a B-2 stealth bomber. This, again, unclassified or declassified, released to the public from the U.S. Central Command CENTCOM. B-252 bombers taking off to conduct a mission during Operation Epic Fury, delivering long-range fire not only to eliminate the threat from the Iranian regime today, but also eliminate their ability to rebuild in the future. You wouldn't want to be on the wrong end of this thing. They say you can't see them, hear them, nothing. You just meet your maker if you're the target. Anyway, guys, we're watching it. Don't forget to thumbs up and subscribe. Updates coming soon. Be safe.